The Great Lunar Deception, Why the Moon Doesn't Orbit Earth. There is a silence in the night sky that most people never question. We look up, we see the moon, and we accept the story we were given, that it orbits the Earth, bound neatly by gravity, predictable and obedient. But what if that story is not the full truth? What if what we call an orbit is only a simplified illusion, one that hides a deeper, more unsettling reality? From a distance, the moon appears to circle us. It rises, it falls, it repeats its path. This repetition comforts the mind. It suggests control, order, and certainty. But the universe is rarely so simple. In reality, both the Earth and the moon are moving, together, around the sun, at incredible speed. The moon is not merely circling the Earth like a stone tied to a string. Instead, it is traveling in a vast, sweeping path around the sun, tracing a curve that never loops back on itself in the way we imagine. If you could step outside the limits of human perception and observe this motion from afar, you would not see the moon making tight circles around the Earth. You would see a flowing, wave-like path, always moving forward, never retracing. The Earth does not sit still while the moon dances around it. Both are caught in a greater motion, bound to the sun's immense pull. The idea of a simple orbit begins to dissolve. So why do we believe otherwise? Because the human mind craves simplicity. We reduce complex motion into neat diagrams. We draw circles because they are easy to understand. But truth is not always simple. It is layered, dynamic, and often hidden behind the limits of our perspective. The deception is not necessarily a lie told with intent. It is a distortion born from convenience. When we say the moon orbits the Earth, we are choosing a viewpoint, one that places us at the center. But the universe does not revolve around our perspective. It moves according to laws that are vast and interconnected. This realization is not meant to confuse you. It is meant to awaken you. Because once you see that even something as familiar as the moon's motion is more complex than you were taught, you begin to question other assumptions. You begin to understand that knowledge is often a model, not the full reality. And models, no matter how useful, are still simplifications. The moon does move with the Earth. It does remain bound to it. But it is not trapped in a perfect circle around it. It is part of a greater journey, one that carries both Earth and moon through space in a continuous, graceful motion around the sun. And perhaps that is the deeper truth. Nothing in this universe stands still, and nothing moves alone. What we call an orbit is not a prison. It is a partnership in motion. And once you understand that, the night sky no longer feels simple, it feels alive. The orbit is a simplified model. What we are taught, that the moon neatly orbits the Earth, is a simplified explanation. In reality, motion in space is more complex than a perfect circle. What we often call an orbit is not a false idea, but it is a simplified one, shaped more by human convenience than by the full complexity of reality. When we are taught that the moon orbits the Earth, the image that usually forms in the mind is a clean, perfect circle, the Earth sitting still at the center, while the moon loops around it again and again in a predictable path. This image is easy to understand, easy to draw, and easy to remember. But ease does not always equal truth in its complete form. In reality, there is no perfectly still center. The Earth itself is moving rapidly around the sun, and the moon is moving along with it. So the idea of the moon making a simple circular path around a stationary Earth is not entirely accurate. It is a model, a way of describing motion from a limited point of view. From our position on Earth, it appears correct because everything we observe is relative to where we stand. But if you shift that viewpoint outward, the simplicity begins to unravel. Scientific explanations often rely on such simplifications. They are not designed to deceive, but to make complex systems understandable. A true, fully accurate representation of motion in space would involve multiple forces, shifting reference frames, and paths that are constantly changing. That level of detail, while more precise, can overwhelm rather than educate. So we choose models that are good enough to explain what we see. This is where the idea of deception becomes subtle. It is not a deliberate lie, but a quiet omission of complexity. Over time, the simplified version becomes accepted as the full truth, and few people feel the need to question it. The mind settles into comfort, mistaking clarity for completeness. Understanding this does not mean rejecting science. It means appreciating its limits as well as its strengths. It invites a deeper awareness that what we learn is often a doorway, not a destination, And beyond that doorway, reality continues, far more intricate, more fluid, and more fascinating than the simple circles we first imagine. Earth and Moon move together around the Sun. The Moon isn't just circling Earth. Both are traveling together around the Sun at high speed, making the Moon's actual path much more dynamic. The idea that the Moon simply circles the Earth begins to lose its clarity when we shift our attention to the larger stage on which both bodies move. The Earth is not standing still in space, waiting for the Moon to revolve around it. It is traveling at immense speed around the Sun, carrying everything with it: oceans, atmosphere, and the Moon itself. This means that the Moon's motion cannot be understood in isolation. It is not a separate dancer moving around a fixed point. It is part of a shared journey. As the Earth moves forward in its path around the Sun, the Moon moves with it while also being gravitationally bound to it. This creates a motion that is layered. On one level, the Moon does revolve around the Earth, held by gravity in a continuous relationship. But on another level, both are sweeping through space together, never retracing the same position relative to the Sun. The result is not a simple loop, but a flowing, forward-moving trajectory. Imagine trying to draw this motion from a distant vantage point. You would not sketch a circle around a stationary Earth. Instead, you would see a long, stretched curve that progresses alongside the Earth's own path. The Moon rises and falls relative to Earth, but all the while the entire system is advancing. Every moment is new, every position unique. Nothing returns to exactly where it was before. This shared motion reveals something deeper about how the universe operates. Objects are rarely acting alone. They are influenced by multiple forces participating in larger systems that define their movement. The Earth and Moon are bound to each other, but they are also bound to the Sun, and beyond that, to the motion of the galaxy itself. When we say the Moon orbits the Earth, we are isolating one relationship out of many. That statement is not entirely wrong, but it is incomplete. The truth is more expansive. The Moon does not simply go around the Earth. It travels with it, carried forward in a continuous, interconnected motion that reflects the complexity of the cosmos itself. The Moon's path is not a perfect circle. From a larger perspective, the Moon follows a flowing, wave-like trajectory around the Sun rather than looping tightly around Earth. The image most people carry in their minds is one of perfection, a smooth circle, a closed loop, a path that repeats itself endlessly. It is a comforting picture, suggesting that the Moon follows a neat and predictable route around the Earth. But when we step beyond this simplified view and imagine the motion from a wider perspective, that perfect circle begins to dissolve into something far more dynamic and alive. If you could observe the motion of the Moon from a point far outside the Earth-Moon system, watching both as they travel around the Sun, you would not see the Moon tracing loops that circle back on themselves. Instead, its path would stretch forward continuously, forming a gentle wave-like curve that always progresses in the same general direction. This happens because the Earth itself is moving forward at a tremendous speed, and the Moon is never left behind. As it swings around the Earth, it is also being carried forward along the Earth's solar path. The result is a trajectory that resembles a flowing line with subtle rises and dips, rather than closed circles. Each rise corresponds to the Moon moving slightly ahead of the Earth in its orbit, and each dip reflects it falling slightly behind. But even in these variations, the forward motion never stops. The Moon does not double back or form loops when viewed from this broader frame. It continually advances, tracing a path that is always new. This realization challenges the way we instinctively understand motion. We tend to think in terms of fixed centers and repeating cycles, but the universe operates through overlapping movements and shifting frames of reference. What appears circular from one viewpoint can appear entirely different from another, so the Moon's path is not truly a perfect circle. It is a complex curve shaped by multiple forces and motions acting at once. The circular orbit we imagine is only a projection, a simplified shadow of a richer and more intricate reality. And in recognizing this, we begin to see that even the most familiar patterns in the sky are more fluid and surprising than they first appear. Human perspective creates the deception we describe motion based on our viewpoint from Earth, which makes it seem like everything revolves around us, even when it doesn't. The sense of deception does not come from the universe itself. It comes from the way we choose to look at it. Human understanding is always tied to perspective, and our natural perspective is rooted on Earth. From here, everything appears to revolve around us. The sun rises and sets, the stars move across the sky, and the moon seems to circle us in a steady, repeating pattern. This viewpoint feels intuitive because it matches what we directly observe, but it is also deeply limited. When we describe motion in space, we often unconsciously place ourselves at the center of the story. Saying that the moon orbits the Earth is not wrong within this frame. It accurately reflects how the moon behaves relative to us, but it also quietly reinforces the idea that Earth is the main reference point, the anchor around which things move. In reality, there is no single privileged center. Motion in the universe is always relative, always dependent on where you are standing and what you choose to measure against. If you shift your viewpoint to the sun, the story changes. From there, the Earth becomes just another moving body, and the moon's motion transforms into part of a larger, continuous path. Shift even further outward, and both Earth and sun become small participants in the motion of the galaxy. Each change in perspective rewrites the description, even though the underlying reality remains the same. This is where the illusion forms, not because anyone is intentionally misleading, but because we mistake one perspective for the complete truth. We become comfortable with a single frame of reference and forget that others exist. The mind prefers stability, a fixed center, a clear pattern, but the universe offers none of these in an absolute sense. Understanding this invites a subtle but powerful shift. It encourages us to question not just what we see, but how we are seeing it. It reminds us that knowledge is shaped by viewpoint, and that expanding our perspective can reveal entirely new layers of meaning. What once seemed simple and certain becomes fluid and open, urging us to look beyond the familiar and explore the deeper structure of reality. Reality is more complex than what we're taught. The speech highlights that scientific models are simplified for understanding, but the true nature of the universe is deeper, interconnected, and constantly in motion. What this all ultimately reveals is not that what we were taught is false, but that it is incomplete. The models we learn are designed to guide us, to give us a foundation strong enough to stand on, while we begin to explore complex ideas. They are tools, not final truths. When we are told that the moon orbits the Earth, we are being given a version of reality that is useful, practical, and accurate within a certain frame. But it is still only a part of a much larger picture. As we grow in understanding, we begin to see that reality does not fit neatly into simple explanations. It unfolds in layers, each one adding depth and nuance to the last. The universe is not built on isolated movements or perfect shapes, but on relationships, objects influencing one another, motions blending together, forces interacting in ways that cannot always be reduced to a single, clean description. This does not weaken science, it strengthens it. Science is not a rigid collection of fixed answers, but a process of refinement. It evolves as our perspective expands, as our tools improve, and as our willingness to question increases. What we accept today may be deepened tomorrow, not because it was wrong, but because we are capable of seeing further than before. There is something humbling in this realization. It reminds us that certainty can sometimes be an illusion, and that true understanding requires openness. When we hold too tightly to simplified ideas, we risk mistaking them for the whole truth. But when we recognize their limits, they become stepping stones rather than boundaries. The moon's motion then becomes more than just a scientific concept. It becomes a quiet lesson. It shows us that even the most familiar things can carry hidden complexity, waiting to be noticed. It invites us to stay curious, to look deeper, and to accept that knowledge is always in motion, just like the universe it seeks to describe.